everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Shelley Meyer YouTube channel and the Women in Medicine Be the Change podcast. I'm very excited to have Dr. Adrienne Udeem with me today. We're going to go over so many things. She's done so much in her career, and I think it'll be inspirational, and I think it'll be a great conversation. So welcome, Dr. Udeem. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, and I love what you're doing. Thank you for bringing awareness to such an important topic and relevant. It's always been relevant, but more so now.
Yeah, it just needs to be talked about more, I think. So speaking of that, let's start, there's a lot to talk about, but let's start with your experience with burnout, or maybe, first let us know where you come from, what you've done, as far as training and stuff, and then maybe some situations in the past that may have contributed to burnout or even present. And then I think we can go into more about what you're doing now.
Sure. So I'm an internist specializing in clinical nutrition and obesity medicine. I've been doing this work for over 15 years. Absolutely love it. It's interesting that I never thought I would be a weight loss doc. It's not what I signed up for when I went to medical school, and actually had matched in a GI fellowship and really thought I was going to be a proceduralist because I really wanted to be a surgeon and thought I was picking the almost next best thing that would allow me to have, a work-life balance. And I don't love that term, but I use it anyway. And, I think there have been several times in my life that I have been hovering around burnout, and maybe didn't go into full-blown burnout because I gave myself permission to pivot. And it is so important, Shelley. And I think it's so hard for us to do for so many reasons, partly our training, partly our norms, our societal norms, all our cultural norms, partly our perfectionism. I mean, there's so many ways we could slice this thing. But I'll just share that, when I did match in this fellowship, I was supposed to start at USC, County Hospital, GI fellowship. It would have been insane. And I decided to get pregnant because I thought it was a good time to just throw in a child and, pop her out in the 1 year I had. And of course I got pregnant and everything, mentally, emotionally changed for me. I dropped the fellowship and then was given the opportunity to explore various aspects of medicine, which brought me into the realm of obesity medicine, for which I put together a business plan. And then the subsequent year became the medical director of the weight loss center at the institution I was training.
Nice.
So, had I not done that, I certainly would have burnt out being Q3 on call for most of the 3 years, because that's what had been promised to me.
Q3, that is rough.
And having to go in, mind you, because, GI bleeds at a county hospital. It's not something that you manage from home. And now having a baby, right? So I did that for myself, but it was very difficult. I mean, I cried for a year before I made that decision. Later, after being the medical director of this program, which was now my third baby, because I had another, or second baby, I had another one while I was there and a third one before I decided to quit that job.
Wow.
Because even though it was wonderful and I had created it and I felt a great sense of professional accomplishment and fulfillment, I had no autonomy. I was, at the end of the day, medical director or not, title or not, I was an employee without autonomy.
Yes. We talk about autonomy a lot here, and I have my own practice. I know you do now. And yeah, that's true autonomy. Not that I'm saying everybody has to have their own practice. That's not feasible, I guess, but it's getting more and more that even if you have that leadership role, you don't have any control.
Well, you're right that it doesn't have to be fulfilled in a private practice, but that requires, institutional change. And while I think a lot of the conversations are happening right now, they weren't happening, nearly 10 years ago when I made this decision. There wasn't any autonomy in that kind of role.
Yeah. And I wish there were more now. I mean, hopefully these conversations are happening more now. And I think they are, but I'm just kind of out of touch with that. That's why I'm talking to so many other doctors to try to figure out what is going on out there. But anyway, continue.
So I left, this really kind of prestigious position. And I love the work. And there's a lot of conversation now about like, do what you love, but doing what you love is not an antidote to burnout. You're right. I mean, you can do what you love. And I did love it. And I loved the place. So it's not, even though ultimately I had to leave the place to save myself, I loved the place. So that's a difficult, position to be in. And so ultimately I left, did go into private practice, seeing patients part-time, because I had all of these other creative pursuits, including writing a book, which I finally did last year, starting a supplement line, which I also did the year, before the pandemic happened. And so again, I think if I had stayed in that role, I don't know. It's like burnout is kind of, it's a spectrum, I feel like.
It really is.
I don't know that I was at burnout, but I don't know that I wasn't, when I decided to leave, but I was definitely done. And then finally, and I know, we talked about this a little bit before, and maybe we'll get to it at the end, being in private practice and only seeing patients 3 days a week for the last, 8 or 9 years, however long, it's almost 10 years since I left that position. I took a sabbatical because unbeknownst to me, I think I was facing burnout. And one might, the old me would say, really? 2 days a week?
Yeah,
feeling burnout when you worked 120 hours as a pregnant resident?
Yeah.
But we have to meet ourselves where we're at, It is what it is. And if you're dealing with a medical practice 2 days a week or, 7, and dealing with children at home in the pandemic, you have a right to be whatever you are.
And you have to be honest with yourself too, right?
Absolutely. That's such a critical piece, is being honest first with yourself. And I don't know that we're not honest with ourselves because we're dishonest. Mm-hmm. I think we don't give ourselves the permission. We don't give ourselves the time and space, right? Yes. Like there are certain ingredients that are necessary in order to allow the thought to go to the places where honesty will come.
So true. So true. Well, let's circle back though, because you said only working 2 or 3 days a week. You're doing more than that. You're doing a lot more than that. So you touched on it. Tell us a bit about your other ventures, because I think they're really interesting and inspirational too.
Thank you. Yes. So I do see, I say work because that's my patient care. Right. But I've always loved writing. Actually, when I was 7 and I moved from Los Angeles to Dallas, now I live in Los Angeles again. I was born in the United States in beautiful San Diego, but to immigrant parents. And I look like them. I don't look like, someone from San Diego. And I had a lot of, struggles of belonging when I lived in Dallas as a brown child, a hairy brown child, I joke in the book. And my 3rd grade teacher gave us an assignment to get out, she gave us spiral notebooks and asked us to write. And so I would write in that journal daily, and I kind of never stopped. Okay. And that kind of morphed as I spoke with patients about weight loss, and I'm prescribing weight loss drugs, which I still do, suppressing physiologic hunger to get them to lose weight. It was always, well, not always, but it became clear to me that there was another hunger in the room. There was an emotional hunger, a spiritual hunger. A lot of the things that we're talking about, hunger for autonomy, hunger for self-love, perfectionism. And the stories were so universal, Shelley, between patients, and I felt like these patients would come in with so much shame around their weight. It was clearly a coping mechanism, soothing for an underlying emotional hunger. And there was so much shame. And I just wanted to be like, guess what? Joe and Jill and Janet, who are here this morning, have the exact same issue. And by the way, so did I. But of course, you can't share other patients' information, and you don't want to take away from the patient's experience by too much self-disclosure. So I wrote it all in a book. I shared those stories. And it's been so heartwarming because, the weight loss piece, that's really the entry point. This book is not about weight loss at all. It's really about our universal emotional and spiritual hungers that are, again, universal. And it's been like the writing was such a joy. It was such a joy to share. And it was such a joy for me personally to do. It was like therapy, very therapeutic writing. And so that book is out. And honestly, I know there's more books in me. And so that's something that I really want to dedicate more time to, is fostering that creative outlet that I know nourishes me, yes, but I can see in the response to the book is also serving a purpose.
What a wonderful combination. I mean, like you said, it's therapy for you. It doesn't feel like work so much for you. I'm sure that sometimes when you have deadlines and things, it does. But so just for those who are listening on the podcast, the book is Hungry for More, correct?
Yes. Hungry for More. It's actually a long subtitle, but very descriptive. Stories and science to inspire weight loss from the inside out. And my goal really was to validate the reader, and that's where the stories come in. There's a patient and personal story in every single chapter, and then science. So, what is the science behind autonomy? There's actually incredible science. Michael Marmont, I don't know if I ever pronounced his last name correctly, but he was a physician who did research for the British social services, and found that tax collectors that didn't have autonomy, not only did they have emotional distress, but also higher risk of heart attacks. Wow. So there's science behind the value for these things. And so I use stories and science to validate our unmet needs and hopefully bring the reader out of a place of shame to a place of understanding, self-acceptance, and then utilize that hunger, lean into it, embrace it, hug it, say thank you, because it's teaching you something. It's showing you that there is a need that is unmet, that we're soothing with food or cigarettes or alcohol or texting or sexting or whatever your dopamine hit is.
Yeah, so many different types you can choose from for dopamine.
Right? Pick or all of the above, Some days it's everything.
Yeah.
But if we can use that hunger as a message, it can be so potent. It can be so transformative.
Yeah, it just comes down to a lot of the tenets of really good therapy is just understanding the root emotion and the root, driver of something, right? So using it and learning from it and resetting your mindset on it. So that sounds really interesting. And then you have a workbook that goes along with it as well, correct?
Right. So when I was speaking around the topic, doing book signings and doing public speaking engagements, the most common question that came back to me was, so how do you figure out your hunger? If you're not pontificating on these things all day long.
Right. And
so I created a course actually of 30 days of journaling prompts, which actually 30 days is probably ambitious. I think if we tackled one a week, it would be much more realistic, but it's 30 prompts that I think will really help people explore these questions for themselves and try and determine what it is that they're truly hungry for. And I am working actually on the workbook compendium, which hasn't come out, but the course is kind of it's a ancillary to the book to help people explore these questions for themselves.
I think that's essential because that's, you saw even as a child how therapeutic it is to get things down on paper, and to have those prompts is important, because sometimes journaling can turn into just complaining, or I mean, not so in that language necessarily, but just writing down everything bad that happened to you. And, or people might think of it that way, just like they might think of meditation as you have to sit quietly and empty your mind. Well, that's not true. And so the journaling prompts, just like a guided meditation, can be very helpful to work through, and they're essential to really work through, because a lot of that with weight and your thoughts around weight and the shame, like you said, it's so buried and so built up deep inside you that it's going to take a lot to dig into that.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I don't mind talking about this writing piece a little bit more. You've already emphasized it in my own life, but there's also great data around writing, however you use it. The quote complaining, I call it a brain dump. And when patients are having difficulty with sleep or insomnia because of ruminations, I tell them to do a brain dump every night, into their journal, and have a safe place to put all of that distress, so that they can, now be clearer and able to sleep. But there's data around all of this. And actually they've shown, for example, that patients with rheumatoid arthritis or autoimmune disease have reduction in pain scores if they're journaling. Reduction in, they've done research on cancer patients.
Yeah.
There's even a study, if I recall correctly, in asthmatics, where they showed an improvement in pulmonary function if you journaled. I mean, that is fascinating, right?
It is. I know.
It's like albuterol.
I know. Yeah, I'm a functional medicine doctor, so we talk about this a lot, meditation and mindfulness and all of that. And it's amazing when you really dig into the data that it's there. There's research and evidence to support these interventions. It's just, you get into the typical medical setting, there's not the time, there's not the education maybe on our part of how to help somebody. So I love the fact that you have these resources, particularly in the weight management world, like to get to the root of the emotion, to really lean into it, like you said. And tell us about the nutrition line that you came up with a few years ago.
Yeah. So, when I left my old position, we were using a lot of meal replacements. Meal replacements were a part of the program. And sometimes I was prepping people for bariatric surgery. And so there's data that if you can get them to do 2 weeks of weight loss, you really shrink down the liver size and make them a better operative candidate. And meal replacements, shakes and bars are great ways to do that. I believe in real food, but if you're running out the door and, don't have time, a high quality protein bar that gives you, the almost 20 grams of protein that you need to help suppress hunger hormones. If you can get that in a clean bar, why not? I'm a huge fan.
So hard to find a clean bar too. Just
correct. And so I was using a brand that was quite frankly garbage. It was created for doctors' offices, but if you actually read the label, it was disgusting. But I was using it because there was nothing else. And then I started, going to Whole Foods and doing research. I was like, well, maybe I can recommend meal replacements that are on the shelves, but I couldn't. I mean, there's hundreds, thousands of nutrition bars, and there was nothing that I could endorse wholeheartedly. And so I had this nagging idea of creating my own bar. And I tried to shush it away. I was like, girl, you do not have time for this undertaking. But it kept, the patients kept asking and they kept knocking on my door. And so finally one day I was like, damn it, fine.
I'm going to do this.
And I went into 3 years of R&D to create a nutritional bar with functional nutrients, high protein, low calorie, created with functional nutrients like ashwagandha, turmeric, all that great stuff. And I call it DEL bar, DEHL bar, all one word. And I call it DEL because, as I alluded to, I am of Middle Eastern descent. My parents are from the Middle East. I speak Farsi fluently. And del is a word that means stomach, literally, but also has a spiritual quality of love, heart, and soul. So when you want to say like, I miss you, like from the bottom of my heart, you use the word del. You say delam tang shode, which is my stomach is tight, but it's really like my heart is longing for you, And so I use the word del because it's functionally stomach, but it's also heart and soul. And isn't that how we should be nourishing ourselves, right? Yeah. Like functionally, concretely, but also spiritually, emotionally. And so that's why I called it what I did.
Wow, I didn't know that. Yeah, I thought it was a cool name, but I had no idea what the background was. That makes it even better. Yeah, I really like that you're using those functional nutrients and ingredients in there because, like we said, there's a lot of crappy brands out there. So yeah, they'll get you the protein, but what else? What other additives are they putting into your body that doesn't nourish your body? So I think that's wonderful. And I think another thing to highlight is you didn't have the time for this, but you had that nagging drive to do it. And maybe more of us should listen to that. There may not be the perfect time to do it, but if it feels like something that's really important to you, there's a way, right? There's a way to accomplish it. So talking about that, or speaking of that, how did you find an R&D kind of process, or how did you even learn about that?
Yes, and I have to apologize for the barking dog that we try to avoid.
My office right here is right next to a vet's office, so I'm surprised we don't hear it.
This is a podcast about working physicians, right, and how we make it happen. So it's all
real.
It's all there, right?
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. All of these things that I did, and it's, people say, "Oh, wow, you've done all of these things," and I have. I'm grateful for that, but I don't want anyone to think that I had all of my all the steps figured out, or I had my SHIT together, nor that I still do. Okay, I don't.
Nor do I.
And so it really, I really was at like the ground level, a Google search,
Starting Google search, yeah.
And talking to people, if it's funny, like they say, once you're open to things, that people and places and things will come into your life. This is after I created the bars, but I realized that one of my daughter's best friends, they'd been friends for 2 years. The father was like a venture capitalist in the nutritional space. And, we never worked together, but, he became a brain that I picked at some point. So a lot of serendipity, a lot of searching, a lot of shushing, that constant, nagging in my ear of like, who the hell are you? Who would buy this bar? Mm-hmm. Even with the book, right? I mean, I have 15 plus years of experience talking to people. I'm not going to say that, I'm this incredible author by birth, but I would say to myself, like, who are you to write this book? Well, I mean, 15 years of patient stories, right, that I was able to translate. But despite that, I still felt, at times that I didn't have the expertise or the experience to share those stories. And so that's a big part of it. It's like, number one, do the work, do the Google search, ask questions, don't be afraid, but then also shush that damn voice that is constantly questioning you. And still does. I don't know that we ever get rid of that. We just learn that we don't have to listen to it, or we learn that we don't have to validate it. We can, hug it and be like, thank you, dear, step aside to the curb.
Yeah. Like, thank you for, trying to save me, but I'm okay. I can do this. Yeah. And I think it's just good to talk about the fact that we all have this imposter syndrome, or, whatever term you want to call it, this voice in our head that does say, you can't do this. For some of the doctors that might be listening, or not non-doctors that are listening too, because I have those in my audience as well. That voice can tell you, well, you can't leave this job. It's safe, it's secure, So if we're really unhappy or we're really burnt out, or, whatever situation is leading to our unhappiness, we need to think about what is causing us to, or what's contributing to our unhappiness, and then shush that voice, like you said, that's going to stop us from making that change, right?
Yeah. And I think, I will say that I've had that, like everyone else, the noise, the running narrative, the dialogue, but I'm grateful for the fact that I have been able, at the times that I did, to shush it and allow myself to explore other things, to allow myself and give myself permission to succeed in other venues and in other arenas. And I will say that it's like anything else, it's a muscle that can be exercised. And while we can't ever turn off that noise that is just human and normal, we can exercise that ability to circumvent it. And it just takes the doing. So
it's like any exercise, right? You got to practice and keep doing it.
So know that we all experience it, but also know that you can build that muscle, that resilience of not letting it take hold of you.
Yes, totally agree. Well, then now let's talk a little bit more about the sabbatical you just took. What'd you do?
Yeah, so it's funny because even in the sabbatical, I kept saying to myself, I wish, like every time I got a text message, I would be frustrated. Every time somebody called me, needed something, I would get frustrated. And I kept saying, I wish people would just stop talking to me, And then it occurred to me like, oh my God, like I need a break from people talking to me. And while I can't return my children, I can I can put a pause on my medical practice, which I really love. I really love talking to patients and respect and value the fact that they trust me. But I'm at the point right now that I can't. So as I'm, talking this out, like this light bulb went off, like, oh my God, I need to take time off. How come I didn't think about this before? And it's so interesting because like with that first child and that second child, I never really even took a proper maternity leave. I didn't. And so here I am now in a position where external factors, I guess, are not forcing me to make this decision, but I'm making this decision completely out of self-care, out of the fact that I need to. And so I decided to take 2 months off. One could argue I could have maybe stretched it to 3. I probably wouldn't have minded that, but it's okay. I took 2 months off, and the first couple of weeks I'm still working, but I'm tricking myself, right? So now I'm like, oh, I have time to do my taxes and to do all these things, respond to emails that I hadn't responded to. And it's like, record all these podcasts because I have a Health Bite podcast as well. Mm. And so then I'm like, you're really like, it didn't dawn on me that I was really like fooling myself until I was 2 weeks in. So there is that, it's not easy. Just because you make a decision to do something doesn't mean that it's easy to actually fulfill that promise. Mm-hmm. And then quite serendipitously, one day I was writing my journal and I wrote down, I wish I could have a week away in nature. And it was like just a pie in the sky dream. I never thought I'd really take off a week and go into nature. And literally the next day, this was while I was planning for the sabbatical, but it hadn't actually started. I go into my office, and in the most serendipitous way, I won't give you the whole story, this retreat center very close to my house, like literally lands in my lap. I had never heard of it before. And someone is describing this place where you go and you hike for 5 hours a day, do yoga for 2 hours a day, eat clean food, turn off your phone. And I'm like, oh my God, there's a portal between my journal and the universe. So
it was there close to you too, the center's not too far?
Yeah, driving distance. Oh. And, I thought, I looked into it. It was a week long. I was like, no way I'm going to leave my kids and my husband for a week for something that's not work related. I've done it to go to a conference or give a talk.
Right.
And I take this to my family, and my daughter, who is going into college and sometimes rolls her eyes at me when I talk to her about these kumbaya sort of things, said to me, Mom, you can't ask something of the universe and then say, just kidding, when it comes. And I'm like, yay, they're listening. Yes. And so I went to this retreat. I did other things during the sabbatical, but I would say that was by far the most wonderful gift that I gave myself, was to take this week to go out and be in nature. And, it's been said in these books, you'll read books or you'll talk to people, executive coaches who will say time off is a business decision. I mean, it is an everything decision. I don't consider my, work as a business, but it's a personal decision. It's a health decision. It is everything. When you take this time off and give yourself permission to pause, so much revelation and insight can come up for you. And I think, if anyone decides to do this and approaches that time and is in that first 2 weeks and is like, where's the insight? Where is it? I'm waiting for it, I promise you, if you give it time and space and not be married to the outcome, just be present, it comes. It really does, and it may not be like in the form of a multi-million-dollar idea, right? But if you listen, you really intuitively know what is right for you and for your work. And that really is the antidote to burnout.
It is. Yeah.
It's really giving yourself that opportunity to dial in and to really explore what you already know is right for you.
Right. But like you said, truly taking the time off and truly, listening to yourself and being in nature is an essential part of it too, I believe. I think we can fool ourselves that a conference might be, a break. It's not. Or that a family vacation even sometimes might be a break. And I love my family, but it's hard.
It's on purpose.
Yeah. 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 My kids are 10, 11 and 13 now. So it's like,
oh, wow. Back to back.
Yeah. So listening to your need for that, cueing into what is maybe not classic burnout, like maybe you're not miserable in what you're doing, but just listening to the voice that says, like you said, when you wanted people to stop contacting you, listening to that voice, the message, I want people to stop contacting me. That means I need to get away, right? So
yeah,
I think, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that to be full circle in this, and I like to be actionable. My podcast called Health Bite. It's called Health Bite because I offer small bites of action. And so my health bite for this segment is to grab a journal and go sit under a tree, right? Yeah. That's the health bite. And I just wanted to tie it back into the work because it occurred to me that precisely what we're saying right now, in terms of giving yourself space and time to pause and to explore, it is also the very way in which you identify your hunger.
Yeah.
So when people ask, how do I know, it's by giving yourself, it's this very thing that allows you to identify what it is that you're truly hungry for. Yes.
I think that's a great way to wrap up this amazing conversation that I have totally loved. And I'm going to link all your book, your podcast, all of that in the show notes and the description on the YouTube page so everybody can check that out and look at what you're doing. I think it's been fascinating, and I love the message that you're putting out there, and keep up the good fight.
I appreciate it. Thank you for this platform. I think it's so valuable for so many people. So thank you.
I hope you liked that conversation with Dr. Michelle Cork. I thought it was really interesting. Being a runner myself, I have found running to be a kind of therapy and mindfulness activity for me. So if you're already a runner and you find that, you probably then identified with this recording or this interview. If you're not a runner, you might want to check it out, or just get out there and walk. Really helps to clear your head and to help beat burnout. And then also, I hope you enjoyed the idea of doing something different outside of medicine. That could be a side gig. So she's coaching runners, and that's pretty cool. So check out and find her information down below. And then if you want to get my guide to beating burnout, check that out down below. If you want to support the mission here, check out my Patreon campaign, or just like and subscribe to the channel. Share the video out, or if you're listening to this on the podcast, please rate and review so that I can grow my podcast. And I appreciate your support. I appreciate you watching and listening, and we'll see or talk to you next week.